Hi, I'm DM Gallibond. In last week at the table, we look at what happened in the 3 actual play games I run on my Twitch channel, which is at twitch.tv/Gallibond. Now let's get on with the show. On Thursday night, we are playing the Essentials game at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Last time we had a full cast on Thursday night as all of our players showed up. Wes playing Gorham, Vernon playing Finn, James playing Abenadam, Michael playing Dorzafir, Ivy playing Hyza, and Chris playing Elle were all in attendance. We recapped that the party had chosen to go to the retired sheriff's Butterskull Ranch next, and they set off from Phandalin without much ado. As dusk fell, the party reached the abandoned village of Coneyberry. When they reached here, they found 3 riding horses without saddles or riders that bore brands which could be from the Butterskull Ranch. Dorzafir was able to calm the horses, and they put them on a leader while they hobbled them for the night along with their own mounts. They camped for the night in the ruins of Coneyberry, and they continued to the ranch the next morning. When they reached the outskirts of the ranch, the wizard's owl familiar reported noise coming from inside the farmhouse, and the rest of the party could see that outbuildings had been burned. They scuttled closer to the building, and eventually, near the burned out husk of the barn, they saw bodies. At least 2 humans and 1 larger, dark humanoid. The developers of this adventure did a really nice job creating a map of the ranch and its surroundings, and that allowed the players to put together a strategy of how they wanted to approach the farmhouse as a group. It was one of the first times I've seen this group really kind of think about, okay, strategically, what do we want to do before we get into a fight? And it's kind of fun to see as a party starts to develop that. Uh, that sort of thought when they can look at a battle map and sort of plan out where they want to be and what they want to do. Abenadam, who is the wizard, sent his owl to scout further, and a javelin flew out from an upper story window of the farmhouse, and the voices of orcs were raised in a battle cry from inside the building. So orcs began boiling out of the farmhouse, and the battle was joined. Ultimately, the party killed 11 of the 13 orcs that they faced. Now, 2 ran away, and ultimately 2 were put to sleep by the to put to sleep by the spell sleep. So, some highlights of the battle included Gorham tanking orcs and slaying several around him, even though he suffered a few heavy blows from their great axes. Hyza used her magic to bless some of her allies, helping them be more effective in the battle. Abenadam used a couple of spells to great effect, including Web, which covered the area around the exit of the farmhouse and gave the orcs fits as they tried to run through it. Now, Finn invented what he termed the jump ball move. So when 2 of his allies got an orc between them, Finn would use his Dissonant Whispers spell to deal psychic damage and force the enemy to run away, which now doing that in that kind of situation allowed both of Finn's allies to get opportunity attacks and resulted in several dead orcs at different times during the battle. This battle really consumed the rest of the night since there were a lot of enemies, but the pace of the action remained high all night. So in the end, the party used sleep on the final 2 orcs and decided to question them. But we ran out of time for the session, and we will pick up there next week. Tune in on Thursday night to find out what happens next. Now on Saturdays at noon, it's the history of D&D. And this is a game that uses the original D&D rules, and I always knew that this game was gonna be a bit speculative and a bit risky, and indeed it has turned out to be kind of hard to get a consistent group of players. It feels like we're almost there, but it's been a little bit hit and miss. And this week was one of the misses. So this week, 2 of our players were sick, and a 3rd player was a no-show. So that meant that only one player was available at noon, and that's really not enough to run a game, even using the original D&D rules. Um, so this is the only game of mine that struggles to consistently attract and keep players, and it's possible that it's a bad time slot. It's possible that just the original edition rules are too different for um, modern players that are spoiled by not having to think. And and you know, so I don't know exactly what it is. So I originally chose the time slot to avoid a personal scheduling conflict from last year. Given the difficulty of keeping a stable group of players, I may have to evaluate over the next couple of months whether this game just needs to be set aside for a while and then relaunch it later in the year at a new time slot that works better for more players. So we're close to 20 sessions in, and I want to see if the attendance will stabilize. If not, I'll just, like I said, probably retire it for a few months and maybe retool the plot a little bit and then bring it back out in another few months and try again and really try to do something to uh, maybe run some sort of uh, you know, pre-game uh, game, pre-game campaign, and get people together just to talk about it and get them familiar with the rules before we dive in. So, anyway, for now, we're going to try again to run our session next Saturday, February 29th at noon Eastern. Show up and find out if we have a quorum and if we have a session. So Sundays at 2:30, we play The Walker of Waterdeep. That's a 5e game where we cross the streams of lore between D&D 5e and Magic the Gathering. This week was session 38, and the party started a session in the middle of their battle against the creature that Caker Lake and her fellow Crawl had found among them in the Undercity of Ravnica. The party finished that fight, defeating the mutated humanoid and the mutated crawl that were in the affected apartment. So when the battle ended, they found a sentient disc artifact that calls itself Aurora. It was keen on talking to Oyahusa, and Caker Lake warned the party that this was the same artifact which had transformed the intruder Rogad into the misshapen, violent, and horrible creature that they had just fought. So Aurora confirmed to Oyahusa that it indeed had punished that guy after it warned him not to touch it, and he decided he was going to touch it anyway. But Aurora says that Oyahusa is interesting and it will not hurt him. Instead, it will open his mind to new possibilities he had never imagined before. So the party remained skeptical about all this until Adamant performed a ritual to identify the artifact. And all the time that he was doing the ritual, Aurora was making snarky telepathic comments to Oyo about, how pedantic these priests of Moradin are, and oh, blah, 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 and all, just going on and being a real smartass the whole time. So, after determining that the artifact was probably safe, the PCs let Oyahusa pick it up, and indeed, he was fine. So, Caker Lake assigned an escort to lead the PCs safely to the surface of the up to the surface of the city, and the party received and replied to several sendings from the Senator Gallia's team to verify that they were safe and where they should meet them. During their travels, they passed a subway tunnel, and they learned that Ravnica, at least in my game, has powered rail transit on the surface, on elevated tracks above the surface, and in subterranean tunnels. So upon reaching the surface, they saw impossibly tall buildings of steel and glass and all kinds of people mingling around. Humans, elves, minotaurs, Vidalkans, centaurs, loxodons, which are people with elephant heads, goblins, and even more kinds of strange creatures. The Boros Legion soldiers and the mages from the Azoria Senate arrived quickly and led the team back to New Prov. So the PCs rode in an elevator, which, as they thought of it, was some sort of a teleportation room. And they arrived at apartments high above the city, set aside for them as ambassadors from a new world, or it's a world that's new to Ravnica. Forgotten Realms has been there forever, but as far as the Ravnicans are concerned, oh, that's a new world to them. Uh, so they met their staff. Their diplomatic apartment does, in fact, come with a staff, which includes a head butler, a cook, and a chambermaid. And they found their suites to be nothing short of luxurious. After some time to wash up, old friends dropped by. General Blaze, Senator Gallia, and Chandler Duran, along with a law mage, and they all apologized and warned the party of danger. So it seems that they had learned after returning that the particular law mage sent with the party was actually an imposter. And the person that they thought they were sending with the party, they actually found dead in her own apartment where she had been murdered a day or two earlier. And so they don't really know who that was posing as the law mage that teleported with the party back to Ravnica, and instead of taking them where they were supposed to go, wound up landing them in the Undercity. So after questioning the party to see if they remembered any details that could help reveal the identity of that imposter, they briefly outlined an agenda for the PCs. The following day, the parties invited to demonstrate their combat techniques and test themselves against warriors from the Boros Legion. General the general, Blaze, is not certain that his troops can defeat the party, and he hopes that seeing the visitors in action will give his legionnaires some insights, and perhaps the legion's training methods can improve or at least be somewhat useful to the party as well. So the party was further informed that in days and weeks after the sparring match, representatives from the 9 guilds in Ravnica will set up meetings with the party to learn more about their world of Toril and tell them about Ravnica and the niche that their particular guild fills. And it's been implied that these meetings may be something of recruiting visits where the guilds will attempt to persuade one or more of the PCs to join them. Now, when the party asked about House Demir, which they had learned about from Caker Lake, the only one who said much was Law Mage Osidar, and he told them that Demir had been thought to be disbanded as a guild since before the guild pact was created. Now, some of the party members are suspicious about that, and several think that this may just be wishful thinking on the part of the Boros Legion. Now, what is the real truth of the matter? They'll just need to keep digging around in Ravnica's dark corners to find out, I guess. So we ended the session with the aforementioned sparring match. It was a 5-on-6 fight as the party were pitted against a group of Boros Legion martial specialists. Now, the sparring match was billed as a live fire match, and indeed both sides are using lethal damage. There are healers and clerics on site, and when the first pawn among the Legion went down, the party saw how his body was levitated out of the arena to the waiting medics, who quickly healed his wounds and revived him. Now, as we have a player from overseas, time ran out in our session before we could finish the fight, and we will pick up at the top of the next round next Sunday. So everyone seems to be having fun with this fight, even though they're not hitting as often as they would hope, and they're taking some significant amounts of damage from their opponents. And I should say that this is the first fight in this campaign where I have homebrewed all of the monsters from whole cloth. Because they're in Ravnica, I am going to the Ravnica decks that have been released for Magic the Gathering, and I am pulling all of the monsters directly out of those decks. And for people who are familiar with Magic, you know that when you put multiple creatures from the same set in a deck that you build, a lot of times those creatures will develop synergies. A creature will have an ability that can affect other creatures that are from the same set or other creatures that are of a similar type. And so I'm going ahead and I am putting that into my deck or putting that into my game so that I'm giving abilities to some of these creatures that will actually work with abilities that other creatures have and making the encounter one that it's like more difficult than the sum of its parts, perhaps. Or at least that's the plan. And uh, I'm doing this arena fight to help me gauge how my tuning is, whether I am tuning the enemies too difficult or whether I'm tuning them not difficult enough to prove to be a real challenge to the party. And so they may wind up finding themselves back in this arena 2 or 3 more times before we finish with this level. Um, and those 2 or 3 more times would be fighting other types of monsters, and it would be other attempts at tuning to see where the sweet spot is so that I can get encounters to be just as tough as I want them to be without being, you know, more tough than I intend. So that is that is last week at the table for February 25th. So you can tune in on Twitch on Thursdays, Saturdays, and Sundays to see what happens in the live games. Or you can keep posted here to find out what happened last week at our table. And remember to always try to make your games memorable so you can have tales from your table to share with your friends as well. Good night, everyone.